Okay, we are ready when you are.
So this is our project, The Cause and Effect of the Collapse in Venezuela. Our group claim is due to the political mismanagement of the economy for years, millions of Venezuelans are leaving the country with little hope for a better future.
Why it matters. So the economic crisis has impacted citizens more than it has to their leaders. People are struggling to survive because of the lack of resources their government isn't providing to them. People are fighting against their own government for personal freedoms and fighting with other citizens relating to gang violence, and people are dying for the lack of resources. So how did Venezuela collapse? We can begin with Hugo Chavez in 1998, how becoming president with the goal to establish social programs that will reduce poverty, increase employment, and increase education. So the social programs were backed up by the profit made during the Asian economic crisis in 1997, which allowed Venezuela to gain a lot of oil profit because of the country's turn to Venezuela instead of the Asian crisis.
And when it comes to the oil profit skyrocketing, Hugo Chavez took to himself to expand on the country's economic programs by establishing even more public spending, like free schools, free college, free food in schools. And so the economy of Venezuela couldn't handle it at the time. But so they took to taking out loans from larger countries such as China and Russia, who had a big demand for oil. So Hugo Chavez took these loans out with the mindset that they would be able to easily repay these loans in the future as oil prices were still high.
And an example of one of the oil policies that Chavez put in place is the state-owned company called Petróleos de Venezuela S.A., which basically is state-owned, had a certain control over oil and natural gas.
And so the start of the crisis can be attributed to Nicolas Maduro, who came to power when Hugo Chavez died of cancer. And when Hugo Chavez passed away, the price of oil was beginning to drop, but not dramatically. So Venezuela tried to prepare, but they were not prepared enough for the rapid collapse of the oil industry in terms of prices. So while that may be good for us because cheap gas, that's terrible for a country like Venezuela, who has no other option because they solely rely on the price of oil.
So in this graph, you can see that during the years 1998 to 2012, Hugo Chavez borrowing from other countries kind of stayed the same in the beginning of his presidency, but kind of increased dramatically once his presidency was ending. This basically helps to understand that Maduro's during the oil collapse, Maduro's kind of received the inherited the downfall of Venezuela and kind of didn't know how to handle all this at once. And so once this shows an example of how the oil production kind of increased during Hugo Chavez, but also, like I said, mentioned, Chavez inherited the oil production decrease.
And so what's happening now in Venezuela is that, as Valeria said, Nicolas Maduro didn't exactly know how to handle the collapse of the oil prices. So he took to enacting authoritarian policies such as police crackdowns and declaring protesting illegal. So because of that, the president of the National Assembly, like the Speaker of our House, Juan Guaido, declared himself president, calling Nicolas Maduro a usurper of power, meaning that he's authoritarian and doesn't represent the Constitution anymore. And so with the worldview, Venezuela can kind of be seen as a proxy conflict between Russia and the United States, just as back then in the Cold War, which is sort of ironic that we're kind of repeating history once again. And that's with America and Russia, it's a battle right now between Juan Guaido, who represents more or less America, and Nicolas Maduro, who more or less represents Russia.
And so, due to the mismanagement of oil and mass spending, Venezuela is struggling to recover from this economic crisis. As you can see, Venezuela was really dependent on oil, and the mass borrowing and spending during Hugo Chavez's presidency kind of played a big role on why Venezuela is struggling with this right now. And Maduro's mismanagement has caused Venezuela to almost stay in the situation for almost 7 years.
And due to that mismanagement, the people are struggling to survive with no food and no medicine and constant violence, which is causing anywhere between 3.5 to 4 million people as of 2015 to leave Venezuela. So due to this failed economy, Venezuelans are struggling Venezuela is struggling to import food and supplies to stores. People are now left to looting stores to get food, because not only do food prices double every couple months, but also due to inflation, the value of the bolivar is dropping very fast. And then government-funded programs such as free lunches in schools is also collapsing due to mismanagement of funding, as Valeria said, and they're shutting down. And then no medicine, so hospitals have run out of supplies for the most part, so people are forced to bring their own cloths and gauzes and even syringes for the little medicine that they do have. And diseases such as the measles that were normally completely wiped out are now coming back because they've run out of vaccines. And they've run out of antiretroviral medicines which help against HIV, so people are also dying from HIV. And then in hospitals, children are left malnourished because there's no food, and hospitals can't do much about that either because they are also running out of food. And then violence. So 73 people are killed per day in Caracas, which is one of Venezuela's biggest cities. And there's constant looting of stores for food and other regular stores for just supplies in general. And then Maduro's is cracked down and has jailed and executed everyone, or most people who have criticized his reign. And then police have also started just killing citizens because they find it a lot easier to deal with, or to just kill them than to deal with the process of arresting them and putting them in jail and the flooded jails.
So I would focus on the potential and the prosperity of Venezuela and how they can prosper once again if they focus on the right things. And first they have to resolve the political/humanitarian crisis and economic stability, like my teammates already said. And that should be the main focus of it, because that's what caused them the downfall. And as they already said, the root of it was the political reformation. So the answers to resolving this should be fixing the socialist government, allowing foreign aid, and resolving the hyperinflation crisis. And with the socialist government, they should allow more checks and balances, because with Nicolas' presidency, it shows the political inequality of it and how he's unauthorized and how there's nobody really backing him up, and he's really just making his own decisions without anybody telling him how to do it. Secondly, the foreign aid, they should allow foreign aid because it will help them resolve the problems. And right now they believe that if they have the new technological advancements, that will help them, but it won't, because they don't have enough money to provide with that. So with the foreign assistance, they will help them with equipment, and they'll give them policy ideas and also help them with money ideas to help resolve. And with the economy and hyperinflation, they have to restrict more on the black market, which is the biggest competitor, which is how the hyperinflation all started, was through the black market, and that's because of the authorization of it. There's no one controlling it, and there's no supervision. And they also have to crack down more on the pro-inflation policies such as dollarization and reforms of the currency along with black market. And this is important because they believe that it's Venezuela's current state is too far unstable just to focus on oil, which will easily run out, which will not last forever. So they have to focus on something that will help them in the long run and not something that will hurt them more.
And in conclusion, even though Venezuela seems to have no hope for a future, there is still a possibility to reestablish the economy and prosper once again in the oil industry to serve the needs of their people.
And this is kind of hard because of the type of government Venezuela holds right now. It's strict authoritarian rule, and also the divide, the struggle of who's in power to make decisions is kind of making it impossible to improve the situation Venezuela is in right now.
All right, I have questions for these presenters. My first question is for Orson. How did your team go about developing the research question?
Yeah, so we went about developing a research question by just simply looking at what's going on in Venezuela right now. I mean, you look at Venezuela and other countries around the world, and you see the current situation that they're in. A lot of people will sometimes ask, how did this happen? How did it get this way? So I think that was one of the major reasons about why we chose that as our research question, because we look at Venezuela now and we say, how did this happen, and how can we fix the crisis that's going on there right now?
Okay, thank you. My next question is for Valeria. Oh, I'm sorry, for Catherine. Looking at the wrong question. What information did you learn about the topic that you had been unaware of, and why is that information significant?
Well, while I was researching, I came across this source that was saying that Venezuela should be more careful with who they let in their country, who help them with their country. And I didn't put that in the slide because it really wasn't that detailed, but I understood what they were saying, that they should be more careful because when it comes down to America, they probably won't help them because they care about them, but because they have something that they want, which is oil, and that in the long run it will really help America, then it will help them.
Thank you. And then my next one is for Calvin. What changes did you make to the report, the presentation, as a result of your discussions as a team?
Well, one change we made was we decided to add a bigger focus on the people and why they're leaving. So it not only is it we should understand why they're leaving, but also it has an effect on us too, because the place they are fleeing to is one of the places is the U.S. and it does affect us, and I think we thought that it would be a good idea to add to.
Adding to what Calvin said, Venezuela, it's kind of, if you think about it, a person who is born and has lived in a country for long years and probably did live for a small prosperity of Venezuela and now has experienced the downfall of it, having to move to a different country can help you understand the fact that a person who has been living there for a while, helps understand no, I wouldn't say no, but most human beings would prefer to stay in their homeland instead of going to a different country to try to survive. And I think that kind of highlights the fact that Venezuela is in a serious condition that needs aid and help.
Thanks. My question that's specific for you, Valeria, is kind of maybe even building on that. Which part of your outcome suggested the need for possible further research?
So further research. Okay, so talk a little bit more about the rulers between the fight for who's controlling Venezuela. I wasn't the person who really researched on the struggle, but it kind of have to do more research on whether the power will shift to a new person or whether the power still will continue on with Maduro's presidency. And if that's the case, what's the future for that? Because you don't really get in the context of what presidents or what leaders want to do with their countries. As time goes on, since Venezuela, as we talked about, is ruled by authoritarian rules, so that information isn't accessed to other countries. So as us who are researching this, we can't really look into information of how the future for Venezuela is. Just assuming if we do this, if they do this, it's just assuming. But definitely, I think further research and having access to that information and knowing whether the rule will still continue with Maduro's or the new Gabriel, like, we need more research on that to figure out what is the future for us.